Try some.
Like, here, eat the sweets.
Come on, Francis. Once you do this, you won't ever not want to. Kurt, make her have a little tiny taste. She thinks it's medicine.
I know she does.
Because it comes from a spoon, right? You always think
No.
medicine or something.
That is good. There's no anything.
You got it
That's a
now.
lot, Kurt. It's a lot.
Got a napkin.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Kurt.
Bye.
Kurt.
No, but he was, I guess, after doing a ton of stuff with the Pixies, finally wore them one time, and he said, I'll never go back now, because it's so easier, and he wears them in shows, and...
Once you go Frank Black, you never go back.
So anyway, you know this is for a half-hour special, right? So it's sort of, there's a lot of old stuff and history of the band stuff that you probably talked about a lot before, but it's for this all-inclusive thing, so...
Right, well, we offered to contribute some of our old stuff that's going to be in our home video for it, because it would be kind of boring without some really old footage, you know.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
That'll be great. I know I had pictured using music from Bleach and getting this montage of photos and album.
Right, and that would look really cheesy.
Yeah.
Just photos.
That'll be really cool. So I guess starting at the beginning, can you talk about what kind of town Aberdeen is and what it was like growing up there? And
What kind of town is Aberdeen? It's a coastal logging town in Washington State, and it's really secluded, and it's about 200 miles away from Seattle, which is the only really large city in Washington State. And Olympia's about halfway in between those two towns. And Olympia has a little bit of culture, and that I went to that place more than I went to almost any other place during my youth to seek out punk rock and a lot of other types of music, live music.
what was it like growing up there? Just as a kid, was it kind of boring and hard to grow up there because there wasn't much to do, or you probably had to invent your own things to do and to amuse yourself?
Yeah, well, we invented our own amusement. We vandalized, skipped school, smoked pot, smoked cigarettes, and that's about it. Listen to music. The local record store only had top 40 music. The local radio station only played top 40 music. So, I mean, we were pretty much just stuck with whatever was there in Aberdeen, you know.
Do you think that's why? I mean, a lot of, aside from, the obvious way Nirvana sounds, you've got a real pop sensibility. Do you think that's where that came from, or what kind of, was it your mom listening to stuff, or what do you think you heard first that might have had a subconscious?
Well, my parents were never music lovers. I don't recall my mom ever really owning any albums besides John Denver's Greatest Hits. Is that the Greatest Hits album where he's going like this with his hand on his hat, like this, going? Is that the Greatest Hits album, or just one of his popular records? I don't know, but that's about it. That and just top 40 radio. You know, Seasons in the Sun, really white bread, white pop music. You know.
Do you think that's what kind of seeped through, or do you hope it was maybe something better than that sort of?
Well, it must have seeped through. I mean, it must have had an effect on us. Yeah. Do
you think, if you had lived in the utopian suburban neighborhood and maybe had the typical family and the Cosby Show upbringing, do you think you still would have picked up a guitar and wanted to do what you do now? Or?
The utopian neighborhood? If you mean if I lived with Dr. Huxtable? Yeah, probably. I think so. My father one time, a few years ago, he wrote me a letter and he said, I would like, in one way or another, he said, if it wasn't for, living in an oppressed town, you wouldn't have had the incentive to really go out and prove something to anyone, and he likes to take credit for that, for bringing me in, bringing me up in a small town. But no, I'm sure I would have looked for punk rock, and it just would have been easier for me, and I would have gotten into it at an earlier age, and I just would have, I just think there's a breed of people who really honestly like music, and there aren't very many of them, really. And those are the people who usually become musicians, and it doesn't really matter what environment you grow up in. It's just, some environments are more restrictive than others.
You hear it eventually anyway, I guess, yeah. So it was, I guess it was Buzz that you heard punk for the first time, right? Or was it before that? Had you any exposure to it before?
No, that was about the time. Yeah, he made a compilation tape for me. I was commuting back and forth between Aberdeen and Montesano. I was living in Aberdeen, and I was going to school in Montesano, which is about 30 miles away. And I had Buzz in a couple of classes. I had him in an art class and an electronics class, and I remember just hanging out with him, and just he had a few punk rock magazines, and I would look at them and just like, I was just mesmerized, I was just like, oh God, what would that sound like? And finally one day I convinced him to make me a tape.
So you were a long time wondering about what it would be like before you actually heard it then? Oh,
for years. Ever since I was like 12, like that issue of Cream magazine when they were following the Sex Pistols tour, in 78, I remember seeing that picture of Sid Vicious and just going, oh wow, that's real rock and roll. It has to be. Look at the blood on his face,
What were you, I guess, living there and not actually being able to hear it before that? What were you, I'm sure you had favorite bands before you actually heard that.
Typical stuff, I was probably the first band that I was really into was the Beatles, and then all that top 40 radio. And then after that, when I was about 4th grade, I was living with my father in Montesano. And what was it? He had a record club, one of those Columbia House record clubs, and one of his friends, he was a bachelor, he was a fresh, he'd just recently gotten divorced, and he was a bachelor, so one of his bachelor friends told him to get one of those subscriptions, and he didn't even open them up. He didn't even open up half the records that came, and they were just sitting there, in the plastic still. And one day I opened them all up, and there was some great music, Finally I got to hear Black Sabbath, the harder stuff that they wouldn't have played in Aberdeen or on the radio in Montesano or Aberdeen, So I was just like, instantly a rock and roll fan, a harder rock and roll fan.
Do you think, thinking back to when you were a kid and every week, what you want to do when you grow up changes. Do you remember what you wanted to do before you got your first guitar?
Yeah. I wanted to be a stunt person. I wanted to be Evel Knievel first. I remember one time I took a piece of metal and taped it to my chest and put a bunch of firecrackers. I taped a bunch of firecrackers on that piece of metal and put my shirt over it and lit myself on fire and jumped off the roof and stuff like that. I would take all the bedding out, put it on the deck, and jump off the roof, take my bike off of it and stuff like that, But then I hurt myself too much. And then, but at a really early age, I wanted to be a rock and roll star. I wanted to play drums, Ever since I got my first Beatles record, I wanted to play drums in a band. I wanted to have the adoration of John Lennon, but have the anonymity of Ringo Starr. I didn't want to be the front man. I just wanted to be back there, but be a rock and roll star at the same time.
Well, eventually that happened, though. Are you comfortable with that now, or does that feeling still kind of hold true?
I'd still rather be a rhythm guitar player, yeah, or a drummer. But I just don't have a good rhythm. I'm terrible. I'm a really bad drummer, but I love to play drums. And I was in high school and junior high. No, actually it started in grade school. Whoops. Let me start that over. I was in grade school band, and I played snare drum for years, and it went up until high school. I never learned how to read music either. I always faked my way through it. I would watch the kid in first chair, you know, I would watch him figure out the piece, and then I would copy him.
Is that so? I mean, but obviously, being a songwriter, though, wouldn't you feel weird about, like, say, if you were, I mean, Pete Townsend did sing, but if you were Pete Townsend or someone like that, and you wrote most of the songs that your band was doing, and someone else was singing them, wouldn't that be kind of weird?
I don't know. I mean, as long as I got the credit for it. If I wrote a song, I'd like to get the credit for it, but then, because all you have to do is look on the insert of an album, and it says your name on it, you know. But, no, at an early age, for a long time, I really did want to be someone in the background, a rhythm guitar player or a drummer. You know, I didn't want all the limelight, because even if you're not a songwriter, you know, the lead singer always gets everything, you know, they get all the attention and everything, you know. So, and I still to this day would much prefer that, really.
Can you tell us about when you and Chris first met? Is it true it took a while for you to get him involved in doing something? Were you trying to get him to play with you for a while?
Yeah, for a long time. I knew him for at least 3 years before we started playing seriously in a band together. But we had, like, side bands with Buzz and the Melvins, other members of the Melvins and friends of ours in that area. We got together and played in a few bands, like the Stiff Woodies. We'd play at local jock kegs, you know. We'd put Knox gel in our hair, like GBH, and go and play live music at these shows, and I mean at these parties, and it was great, you know. We freaked everybody out. But everyone was so drunk that they didn't care about our appearance. They just wanted live music, you know.
Just gotta try as hard as you could to piss the rednecks off.
Yeah, and get free beer.
Yeah.
And condoning drugs, aren't I? Sorry. Smoking. Yeah, we smoke pot. It was so great. It is too. I remember seeing that in my high school locker gym. Alcohol is a drug too.
That's one the government can make money off. So what was it that finally made you? I mean, I guess which is Chris didn't want to be in a band, right?
I don't think he ever really had very many aspirations to be in a band, really. He just liked playing guitar. I knew he had a guitar for years. But, Dale Crover, the drummer for the Melvins, and I made a demo in, like, late 85, and, at my aunt's house on a 4-track. And, I had the tape for about a year or so. And I was always trying to push it on my friends, you know, to try to get them into starting a band with me. And one day Chris, after probably hearing it a few times, just decided, hey, this is pretty good, you know. So finally the hint worked, you know.
Was that just, I was asking Chris about this earlier, he wasn't sure. Did you play bass on that as well, or was it just guitar and drums and that was it?
I played a little bit of bass on it, and Dale played bass on the other parts. Some of the other songs.
That was Fecal Matter, right?
Yeah.
Was that? Yeah. Okay.
That was my band, my imaginary band.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember the first time you played together? Did it click right away, or is it? I mean, I guess just because you had similar tastes in music, it might have. But
I think it clicked in a way where just the fact that we were actually playing music, and I heard these songs with a full band for the first time. It was just so amazing, you know, to actually play. I mean, I'd heard these songs because they were recorded, but all the instruments were dubbed, you know, and to play them live in a room, you know, it was amazing. It was like the most incredible thing I've ever done, and I'd been wanting to do it for years, you know. I mean, I was like 6 years overdue of already having a guitar and wanting to play with other people, but I could never get anything past, like, some guy that plays drums, and he'd bring his drum set over to my house, and I'd start playing this raunchy music, and they'd leave, you know. I could never get anyone to stay more than a day or a few hours.
Was he playing him the way you pictured them being played, or did he just add something more to it that you liked even better, or how was it? What was your first reaction to him playing?
To his playing? He'd basically played the same notes that were on the tape already. We basically just played the songs that were on the tape, on the Fecal Matter tape. So, yeah. I mean, he's added stuff. He's added his own style to the band now since we've started writing songs together. But initially, we were just playing those songs off that tape.
What was the first thing you did together? Was it Hairspray Queen? Or did he actually, I mean, it went from beginning with...
Oh, the first song that we wrote together? Yeah. Ooh, God, I don't know.
I think he thought it was Hairspray Queen.
It could have been, yeah. But even at that time, when we first started writing songs, I would come up with the bass lines and everything. I would show everyone what to play, because I was still writing songs, on my own time. And but that was probably one of the first songs that I had written at that time, and we started to practice with as a band.
Do you have any memories of the first couple of gigs that you did?
Oh, sure. Well,
Were they parties or...
Oh. Let's see, the very first one.
God,
it was a party, I think. Yeah. Well, sometimes, I mean, we considered a gig at, I don't know, if we played together in the house for a couple of hours, and if two people stopped by, we considered that a gig, a show to us. I mean, that was good enough. We had an audience of two people, locals who hated our guts, that thought it was terrible music, But the first official show we actually played was at a party, and it was way out in the woods. I can't even remember what town it was. It was somewhere in between Montesano and Aberdeen, and it was, a typical kegger type of thing, and it was pretty amazing. That was a fun night. It was, I think it was Halloween night. We were really drunk, and we had some fake Halloween blood, and we smeared it all over ourselves and played our 7 songs off the tape, and we alienated the entire crowd. The entire party moved into the kitchen and just left the band, just left us there in the front room playing our songs.
Was that Aaron?
Yeah, that was with Aaron Burkhart. Yeah.
The first single you did after you went to Sub Pop was a cover. Did you have any concern? Why did that end up being instead of one of your songs?
I really don't know. I really don't have a very good answer for that, other than it was a pop song. It was one of the only palatable songs that we had. At the time we were writing stuff like Hairspray Queen, and we had a lot of, even though there were a little bit of pop element in some of the songs, we thought that people would be able to swallow it easier. We'd get instant attention by that. It was such a catchy song, and it was so repetitive that we thought that, people would listen to it right away and remember it. And also, I think Bruce or John, I think it was John, suggested we record that song too. It was one of their favorite songs that we did.
So you've been doing it regularly at gigs already?
Yeah.
Well, then I guess once people hear that, then they'll pay attention and listen to the other stuff then.
Yeah. I guess that was the idea. I don't know.
So was it Sub Pop's idea to only do 1,000 of them, or was it?
Yeah, it was their idea. It was almost a surprise to us. They might have warned us. They might have told us that this is what they were going to do, but it was kind of a surprise at the time. We were just so thrilled to actually put out a single that it wasn't until after only 1,000 were printed that we started to complain about it. It was like, but there's more people who want to buy this thing. Why not sell more? It just didn't make any sense to us at the time. I understand it now, but still, if you're going to put something out, that's why we were signed to a major label. There should be, everyone should listen to it if they want to,
How long after that did Bleach come out? Was it about 6 or 8 months? Or?
I don't know, honestly. it seemed like 2 years. It just seemed like forever. But I think it was a little bit longer than 8 months. I don't know. I think there are dates on the single, and there's a date on the.
I know it was
on
the
album.
year. I know it was the year following, but it's hard to kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know what months they came out. So, is that looking back on that? Is that I know there was. I can't remember who told me this or where I heard this at the time, but was there some concern? I don't know if it was on the label's part or your part or whose thinking it was that you had these songs that had pop sensibilities to them, but I don't know if it went into the production or whatever it was, but that someone felt like since you were on Sub Pop, it had to sound different from the way you wanted it to sound or something, or someone was concerned about you making a Sub Pop record and something that they could work with. Or
Who was concerned with that?
I can't remember the details on it, but was it? Did you feel like you had to make a Sub Pop record for them, or did you absolutely make the record you wanted to make, or was there some sort of feeling that?
Not really. I've always felt that there should have been an album before Bleach, because by the time that we recorded the songs off of Bleach, we were really into that kind of music. I mean, we don't regret it now, but at the time we should have put out the Fecal Matter tape, or at least a lot of the songs that were on Fecal Matter tape. We should have re-recorded them, you know, because that was just a period of our band. That was just part of our progression, you know. We were really into experimental, noisy, like Butthole Surfers kind of music, you know. And there's just, I mean, that's always been the case with us. We always should have put out something a little bit before the last record, you know. But
so a lot of the stuff that ended up on Incesticide, you wish had come out before Bleach? Or?
Yeah. Most of the stuff on Incesticide should have come out before Bleach, actually. But also that we did feel a little bit of pressure, a little bit of intimidation by the whole Seattle scene, because everyone was so heavily into this retro 70s thing. And because we were on that label, I mean, there was an element of that there, you know. It was like, I mean, Jonathan had quite a few suggestions from what I can remember, you know. I mean, it wasn't like they demanded it. It wasn't like, you know, what a major label. I mean, I've heard of some really scary major label stories, but there was a little bit of major label attitude going on with Sub Pop at the time, you know. I mean, I remember one time Jonathan suggested I change some lyrics in one of the songs and stuff like that, you know. And that was just kind of weird, because it's supposed to be an independent label, you know. And you know what I mean? I mean, you should be able to do exactly what you want, you know. I mean, but if we weren't so spineless, we would have done it. We would have done exactly what we wanted to do, you know.
So had you wanted to put some of the older songs on Bleach and ended up just doing the new stuff on your own, or was that sort of?
I think at the time.
Did you write new songs for Bleach?
Yeah, we did write new songs for Bleach. There were a lot of songs that were just written within the 2 weeks, or even the last week prior to recording. You know, I mean, at the time we had a time scheduled for the recording of the album, and at that time we only had maybe 6 songs, you know. And during the week prior to that, we wrote a whole bunch of songs, you know, and we just I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I guess my question is why the songs that you wrote in those 2 weeks made it on and not the older ones. Was that your decision, or?
Yeah. No, I guess is what I'm trying to say is that we wrote so many songs in that week right before we recorded that we were excited about the new songs, so we wanted to record them. But initially we wanted to just record the few new songs that we had and re-record most of the stuff that was on the Fecal Matter tape, and that would have been the album. You know, it would have been a lot more like Incesticide, but we just happened to write so many new songs, you know, that we just put it on Bleach. And they just happened to have been more in the 70s vein, you know.
Do you have any memories of that tour? Like, I mean, I know I've heard some hell stories of the Mudhoney tour over in Europe and stuff about what was going on. Just equipment breaking down all the time, and 20 of you crammed in a van, no money. is that pretty much the case for the whole thing in America as well?
Yeah, I can't say it was worse, but it was probably about the same because we chose to tour in the middle of the summer in the South, you know. Imagine being in Texas in July, you know, packed up to the rim of the van with T-shirts and equipment with 4 members, you know, with no air conditioning, you know, tooling around, living off of $30 a day if you're lucky, you know. It was fun, but we should have been a little bit more smart about it, you know. We should have toured in September or something, you know. But we were so excited about getting the record out and going on tour that we just went for it. You know?
Was it any better?
Time for tape change.
Okay.